You are tuned into the Spotlight series with Community Works Institute. I'm Zach Ritter. I work at Cal State Dominguez Hills, Associate Dean of Students. Please check out communityworksinstitute.org. They bring the community to the classroom and the classroom to the community. They deal with ethnography, storytelling, DEI work. There's institutes all times throughout the year. I have presented at their institutes, and I think it would be great professional development for your K through 16 educators. So please check out communityworksinstitute.org. We are very excited to have someone in this proverbial studio today. Cara Lawson is here. And I'll let her say stuff about herself, but she is she works for Showtime currently as assistant to a showrunner. She's worked on other Hollywood-esque projects, but but that doesn't solely define her. She is expansive throughout. She's very interested in educational K through 16 issues. Her parents are educators. She's interested in folklore. She's interested in like spirituality and like, what are we doing here? And like, what does this all mean? And how do we get to a better place as a society, both internally and externally? And a really, really good friend. And we have the most mind-expanding conversations. So Cara, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. Wow, what an introduction. Thank you.
Yes. So, all right. What have you been feeling this last week in terms of issues of like representation? We talk about representation a lot in media. Like, I don't know, what we just got through with the Oscars. We got through with a lot of kind of milestones for Hollywood. I think this past year, even through COVID and trying to entertain America for better or for worse. As a person who thinks deeply about race, class, gender, all the identities, all the things, what are some of your musings on representation in Hollywood in the last week or year?
You know, it's interesting because what's on TV right now, I'm watching how, especially like genre-wise, they're opening up the casting. And I was watching a show just on Netflix, and they had all different kinds of people, and I was surprised watching it because I'm not used to it. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm excited. You see people that like look different, and they have all different skin tones, and it looks like they come from all different backgrounds and everything like that. And inside I was like, oh man, are people gonna be okay with this? And that was my reaction to it.
Wow.
Which was an interesting reaction to have, because it's something that I've always wanted. And I was thinking about, the stories I grew up on, the things I grew up watching on like TV and film, and I didn't see Disney princesses look like me, and I didn't see other characters that looked like me. And it's so important to have that. And so to now see it starting to happen, I'm like, oh, this is amazing. And at the same time, I'm like conflicted, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what if it goes away? So that's been something that this week, as just watching certain stuff, and it's happening a lot more. And where I work and everything, the push for it is really, really good. But it's still so far to go. It's like I'm seeing it, but there's I say that with the being like, we have very, very far to go in terms of the types of stories we tell.
But I think it's interesting that you're like, what about the dominant narrative backlash to this stuff? And I think that we often have to worry about that in America. So let's take it back a little bit before we jump more into this. So like, we've had some really interesting conversations about like your mother's a white woman who's an educator, like early childhood educator. and your father is a Black man jazz musician and then college educator administrator.
Mhm.
So you got like both ends of the education spectrum with their careers. Um, and I love the story that your mom like saying like trying to like explain race to you as a child and be like, yeah, you're like a zebra. It's like you're both white and black. I mean, it's just like such a, I mean,
Yeah.
it's cute, but then it's also like kind of maybe interesting and instructive too.
I still use it to tell people because people are still confused as like what you are. And then they're like, are you like white with black stripes or black with white stripes? And I'm like, you know what? I don't really know. And then it's because people I think people they really want to understand. They do. Like, you know, there's a group of people that like, you know, they've got their own intention. But what I've come across is most people, they just want an answer that feels comfortable, that feels like it makes sense to them. They want it, you know. And so and you know, multiracial people, we're still trying to figure out what exactly to do with us, you know. They're still trying to figure it out. So
why
there's still a lot of questions.
why do they want to put you in a box so quickly? Like, so if they find out you're multiracial, what does that do for them?
Um it causes it causes them to be uncomfortable. It
Uh,
gets weird.
uh,
And it's really quick and it's really sometimes very subtle, but they're like they just like freeze and they're like, oh, okay. You know, I think it's very, very human to like want to be like, oh, this is this, and then that is that. And then, okay, also we put our plates here and we put our cups here. And that's a very like human thing to do. And so, and then we do it with race because that's what happens. But like, that, you know, no one ever, they just, when you go to fill out whatever form, you check your box and then you're like, oh, I am that. So you're constantly like reinforcing it.
mm.
But when it's like at the bottom, it's just other, and then it's got that line, which I actually love that line because I always write something in. On my on my ACT, I wrote mocha choca caramel latte, and then I was like, okay, other. And then I remember turning in, she's like, I can't read. This is funny, but you can't. You have to like redo your entire like thing. And I was like, just because you can't erase on the thing. It's like very official. So but
That's
yeah, but that other box is very hard for people to understand.
yeah. Wow, they made you undo it. But if that's how you identified at the moment, then that's kind of disrespectful on their part. Okay, interesting. So it's transgressing the like monolithic racial categories that we have on these government forms. And so you are, just by you existing, it's messing with people's just view of the world. And you're like, I need you to fit into this thing so that I can understand and maybe control these things in my life. Yikes. Okay. So does that does that also feed into your like kind of interesting take on things of like why are humans like submitting to boxes and then also like living their lives in cubicles, and your notion of just wanting to like throw the cubicle on its head? Where did you get this notion of we need to shake up society, we need to tell different stories through the classroom, through movies? Where did you get that ethos from?
I got that from being homeschooled.
Okay.
And because both my parents were adamant about just trying something differently, like they are kind of like that, like just naturally as people. And so it's in my DNA to flip cubicles.
Mm-hmm.
And how we were taught, and like our whole even the space that we were taught in, I mean, the walls were covered in like sentence strips and pictures and diagrams and artwork, and we were just like surrounded with all different ways that like a little kid can take in information, and it is amazing. And she wanted to try, she'd already been doing these things. My mom was very, very revolutionary in this. And it, I saw, and I remember not wanting to go to school because I was like, oh, it's going to change. And, you know, like we did field trips during the day. We would go to museums. We would learn about history in the museum. Now, like dinosaurs, like learning about that. And then I mean, there's just, it's so incredibly interactive. And so I think that since that was my introduction to the world, it really like up until like this moment right now, it's just like the interactiveness that things can be means that you're kind of fluid in between boxes, and you look at things a little bit differently, because it kind of it seemed like when I was a kid anything was possible, and in certain classrooms that was taken away, or it was at least reminded that, you know what, maybe it's possible, maybe not for you. And this is all stuff that was, you know, just kind of baked sometimes into the curriculum. But I remember when there was structure and yet there was freedom at the same time. And I remember it very vividly. And so I stand by it.
Wow. So when anything was possible, I like that. I wrote that sentence down a couple weeks ago. I was like, it just came to me. So that's interesting that you were vibing on that level. My mother is very like hippie-esque, and she was an educator, high school ESL teacher. And she had some of the same structure of like raising us, of like, let's read you poetry, you should draw, you should like take a vacation, and we'll go to this like Native American reservation and like teach you about the history of like genocide in this country. And then my dad was very, very structured, and like there's a right way to do it, a wrong way to do it. So it was interesting having those juxtapositions of personalities and education types. Waldorf, Summerhill, Montessori all have these kind of loose structures of the student or child should be able to dream, play, do, create. What were some of the things, and also your father is a jazz musician, which I think like life is improv, education is improv. Like, where does the mind wander? I want to, like Summerhill, I want to learn French today. Like, teacher, can you like help teach me that? And like, okay, like let's start learning French. And how does it relate to other Latin Romance languages? Tell us more about your childhood upbringing and the influences from your parents, and also your like mother's philosophy on educating, homeschooling.
They have such a respect for curiosity. Like, it's amazing. I'm so grateful for their respect for that, because that it taught me so much. And then for a while, like I never lost it, but I like put it in like a closet and a drawer and like a cabinet. And then it would just burst out, because it's like there's no keeping, like once you're curious, there is no like really turning away from that.
Right.
But yeah, it was, they had seen how things had gone. And my dad, in addition to all the things you mentioned, he was also a principal of elementary schools. And so they came in having seen so many different avenues, and they were brought up in a way, I think it was, they wanted to do it differently because they had experienced it in a different way. Like my dad, who is brilliant, was written off in the classroom. And because he didn't have the same, what they were measuring as intelligence, it didn't register for him. And so he was told all of these things. He internalized it for a while. They told that he couldn't, and my dad is like a prolific speaker, but they're like, you know, you can't speak. And it was very traumatizing for him, but he was like, I'm gonna make it different for my kids and for basically any kid that I come in contact with. My mother's the same way. So they had like an extreme dedication to keeping the space safe enough for us to be able to do it. Like, and it wasn't like it was like, oh, well, you know, anything goes. Like, but it was like, when you're out in the world, you're going to still be met with this because they forgot that magic exists. Right? And you're going to have to navigate that. But don't worry, because if you come back to us, we're still going to like support you in what other people say may be different or maybe weird or maybe unconventional. And so they're really supportive in letting myself and all my siblings just like explore the world. You know, they're like, just go out and play. And they'd like let us be like weird and like, you know, and we'd turn into like, you know, just like gather berries and leaves and play house and like all these like amazing things that they were so supportive. And they're like, awesome, do this with this. What if you did this with this? What if, you know, just constantly just asking us to engage with the world. And I remember the loss of this when I went into certain classrooms. And I remember, and I'm trying, even at the age I'm at right now, to like recapture that, because it's like, it is so important when you're like forming yourself, but also when you're an adult. And
yeah,
it's really, really interesting stuff though.
our society is it's like the Ken Robinson thing, right? The paperclip. You give a paperclip to a kid, it's like you can like put it as an earring, you could put it on your head, you could like put it on your arm, you can like catch a fish with it, you could blah blah blah. And then an adult, it's like you just put it on the paper. There's no creativity, just one thing. And that's kind of sad. And I feel similar in that as we go through life, like work, relationships, whatever, society, taxes, mortgage, it's like, don't be creative, and it's hitting it out of you. And so that kind of I don't even want to say childlike energy, but like curiosity in the world and what could be, and like, why are we doing it like this, and like, why are we mass incarcerating like all these people, and like, why are we paying money to police officers to kill Black citizens, like, who also pay the police to kill them? Like, wait, why are we doing this? There's a different way.
I was thinking about this morning, actually. I was like, because I'm like, what I was like trying to analyze what happened once I came out of that space and happened in specifically like high school and college and part of graduate school. What happened when the curiosity and the creativity was not looked at, you know, with respect, with that childlike, even the sentence childlike quality is like, some people are like, oh, we should leave childlike qualities to the children.
Right.
You know, like you grow out of that. And if you don't grow out of that, then you're Peter Pan, and that's a problem.
Right.
You have to grow out of it. And yet we ask people to solve problems.
Right.
And then we get mad at them, when they can only put the paperclip on this way. So it's interesting because it's like, I mean, tell me what you think about this, about like how do you reintroduce this back in? Because,
well, I think the irony is that Google, my friend worked at Google in Venice over here, and they are trying very hard to reintroduce creativity. That's why you have like the rock wall, and you can like play PlayStation, and you take a nap at work, and you can get snacks and talk and play cards and play these games. And I think that whatever smart organizations that probably want to make more money, and I want to hear what Hollywood's doing, but are trying to re-tap into creativity and new ways of thinking in like tech startup world, in a bunch of different industries, but not enough. Like I don't think we're doing it in like education as much as we should, in banking and in legal services, in all in policing. There's so much that we're not tapping into. But I'm curious, when you're this kid who has this really cool experience, and then you come into the formal education. Were your teachers like, WTF, what's wrong with this girl? Or like, how did that interaction go?
Some of them were very, very encouraging.
Okay.
And then I think even before, sometimes I didn't even need like a negative reinforcement from a teacher to become quiet. And that's when I became quiet, a lot quieter and really shy, because I was just like, I saw and I looked around the world, and I have enough sense to know that however I was doing it may have been not the way that others did it. And I was like, you know what, I'll just be a really good student, and I'll try to get the A's, try to read the books. Meanwhile, I'm ingesting all this stuff, and I'm not really learning, it's certainly not retaining.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it definitely was, I've definitely been like, oh gosh, the weirdo, the outcast. Oh my goodness, absolutely. A degenerate is even a word I would say that captures the energy of how I felt in the classroom before, because it's just like what I would like to do, or how I would like to be like, well, yeah, I would like to be this thing and this thing and this thing and this thing and this thing. And they're like, you have to pick one of these. You have to pick one. You can't, it's going to be too much. It's too much. Or in Hollywood, it's too expensive. It's going to be very hard. It's unrealistic. Come on, tone down, tone down, tone down. And that feedback just made me just become more internal and more internal. But at the same time, like, I would just be like, all right, well, I just won't tell you about what I'm doing, and I'll just go work on everything in secret. I just go, and so I would just work on things in secret. People have like no idea what I'm doing, and that's fine. Because I know enough, or I learned to know enough to protect that space. You protect the creative space like a stone guardian.
Which you're still doing today, because you write scripts, you write like.
Absolutely. And I have a room that is protected, that very few people come in, and because you hold it, once you know to hold it sacred, you share with the people that you think will get it. And then once it's more finished, then you give it out to the world. But in the process of creating, because as a society, we're still trying to like figure out and navigate what a creative space looks like, and how to cultivate it, but also just how to accept it. Because I know that society is so nowhere near close what I need as an artist. I'm just like, I'll just stay away from, I'll go and I'll hide and I'll create, which probably isn't the best thing, but it's what I know right now to be able to work. I'm curious to see in 10 years what that's like.
I'm thinking of the stories you told me of. The first is the assignment. You went to high school in Chicago, and the assignment of plan your wedding. Right. So tell folks about that assignment and what you did with that, because it's brilliant.
Yeah, it was I don't remember what the class was called, but I think it was called human relations or something. But one of the big final projects was a plan your wedding. And I thought I was prepping for the Peace Corps. Like, I thought I was prepping to be like, all right, we have like this person, maybe one day she ends up at like the UN, or one day she ends up like as an ambassador, or someone who's working with communities. And so when I got in there, I was like, okay, this is like, and then it was showed about this huge binder, like one of those 3-inch binders, and just like pictures and pictures and pictures of what the wedding planning process was like. And I was like, I don't even know if I want to get married. Like, I just was like so anti like all of it. And so I totally rejected it. Of course, I'm always like because my parents are they help teach other teachers, because that's like part of what they do. And because I grew up, like all my time was spent in like the principal's office. Like I grew up around teachers and educators. So I am always actively being like, hey, this thing happened. And I'm like, yo, not good, not great, right? Not helpful for me as an adolescent. So I totally did that with this. And my dad was like, well, I mean, do you want to pass the class or like just make it your own? And I was like, all right, so I'm making my own. So yeah, I mean, I just like put in like pretty much every progressive agenda that I could like slide in. Like my betrothed would, like, instead of a ring, because I just found out about the diamond and stone industry. I was like, instead of a ring, if this guy really loves me, he'll go like plant a forest. And I was like, here's how he could do. I'll give him the plan. I'll be like, and then I told my friend, I was like, actually, low key, this is great. Like, just pass this on to like future boyfriends, because like this is a great way to win my heart. But yeah, go plant forests and go create community centers, and yeah, it was just like I just can't, I couldn't sit there and just fill a bunch of images. Not that that's a bad thing for someone to want the spectacle part of a wedding. I don't judge that. I don't demonize that. Like, it's a show. You want the theater aspect of it, go to town. But to be told and being prepared in the world, my body was just like, I don't know if this is for me in this way. And so I was like, I'll just try to like do it my way. And I remember presenting it, and everyone was like, and I just stand up there, and it was like, it was weird. It was awkward, and I was awkward because I knew that I had this like completely like little monster project, and everyone had their like beautiful thing. And I was like, all right, well. And they're like, oh yeah, that sounds like Cara. And then it's like, okay, great. Like, at the time I did not think great. Now I'm like, go, Cara, go, keep going. But at the time I was just kind of embarrassed, and like, but I was like, I refuse to do it the way that this person thinks I should do it.
Wow. Wow. No, that's so dope. I mean, I wish there was more of that.
Not for me.
And bucking the system. And so like, all right, so taking that ethos of like flipping over desks and like, I'm not going to do this wedding. I'm like, I want to be with a partner who's planting forests and creating community centers, because that's more, significant for society. And let's not buy diamonds and feed into this industry. I mean, it's rational, it's brilliant. So you thought about maybe going into education, and then you're like, actually, I think maybe I can tell stories and educate folks more about how to flip over desks through cinema. So tell us some of those maturations of what got you interested in going into like film.
Yeah. So I had actually started off wanting to work in kind of like combine like education and social work, but specifically working with the cases that other people didn't want to deal with, heavy trauma. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, okay, so I started off like going the route of like basically psychiatry. Mm-hmm. And then I was in the class, I was absorbing a lot of information. I was very, very useful. But I was like, I don't know if this is how I want to do it. And yet the subject matter is so interesting to me about like, how can you help heal people? Like, how do you open up a space for someone to heal? And I would always just kind of like look at all the art students and how like wonderfully weird they were, and especially actors. I loved actors because they're just this beautiful, they're so wonderful because they live in between worlds very much. And they're so empathetic, they're so understanding. And I always saw them and I was like, what are they doing? They're just like, they're in their costumes like at night. And I'm like, getting done with one of my night classes, and I would see them and I would just like, oh my God, who are these people? And so I did a couple theater productions, and I had done theater, I'd done music, I'd done dance. Like I was raised the arts baby way. So I always loved that. And I'd taken a lot of acting classes. And it was in those acting classes that I was so shy. I hated performing, but I loved the story aspect of it. And so I switched over, took film classes, and I had just seen films that changed like my existence. A movie like Children of Men, Alfonso Cuarón, changed how I saw the world. And I started just thinking, what is it about being in a theater, watching someone else's story, being like totally immersed and lost in it, and you come out having learned something? And is that space something I could work in? That's what I was most attracted to, is that I came and I was a different person when I left the movie theater, when it came to those really profound stories. I was different, and I knew that I was different. I knew that I was different for the better. And I'm like, I want to do this. I don't know how I do it. I'm already like well into a certain amount of school. I get a change again. But I was like, you know what? I think this is how I can do it, because if you can give someone a story that at least gives them the opportunity to learn, to change, and you do it in a way that is so engaging and interactive, you're giving them a gift in a way where and the gift is not necessarily from you. It's a gift that has just been like sort of assembled by you. It's not your gift, it's the universe's gift. And you're just being like, you know what? I'm just gonna pass this on to you. That's what I think of movies and what the power of it can be, when used correctly, however, like when used ethically.
Yeah.
So that's what kind of caused the change. And so then I switched and I went to 2 film schools and moved out here and did the grind. And
so wow, that's really beautiful. I need to see that movie, Children of Men. I've never seen it. So now you've been in it for a while. Okay, but before we get that, so we're talking to K through 16 educators here. In your director school, did you like it? Were there things that you would change? Like, was it artsy fartsy, great, I can be creative? Or was it like, like what was it?
It's interesting. With certain people, yes. And those professors I clung to for hope. In other ways, no. That the filmmaking, any type of art, is extremely subjective. And so I understand that. And I think that I was trying to figure out how to tell the type of stories I wanted to tell, the way I wanted to tell them. And I felt met with a lot of limitations and restrictives and just limited way of thinking about things that I struggled. And I was like, the types of films, the types I want to make, these fusions of this culture and that culture in this time period, I was still trying to figure out how to kind of talk to people about that and get people excited about that. And so film school, both of them were extremely interesting for me. Extremely interesting because when I feel like it's not going to be accepted, or when I felt, I should say, it's not going to be accepted, I retract. And I'm like, you know what? I'll just keep that for later. And I'll say that one for later. And to do that, and now I see when other artists are doing that. And then you can kind of see them because they'll maybe sometimes brush over it when they're talking. And you're like, a gem. This is what you really want to do. What do you really want to do? Tell me about this one. This is the one you're hiding. I know because I have a whole closet of hidden wonderful, magical, abandoned worlds. Which one is that? Tell me about it. So it's really, but yeah, I learned that. So even though it was difficult for me, I do not regret having learned that lesson that way, because now I can see when other people, they just need to be encouraged or supported, and they just need someone to like kind of just like respark them.
Mhm.
And oh my gosh, if I can be a facilitator with that, like my parents did for me, when they're just like, yeah, I know what the whole world is saying. I get it, I get it, I get it, I get it. But what if
Ah,
what you wanted to do was brilliant, was fantastic, was needed, is amazing? Okay, now go forth. Go.
ah,
What if it's possible?
ah. Yeah, yeah. So you're picking up on people's, you're very empathic. You're picking up on people's like little traumas, and they're like, no, there's the gem. Like, listen to yourself, listen to the internal self. Let's polish off the gem, and like let's actually do something with that. Because these systems are teaching people like you were telling me about, it's hypercritical in film school, where it's like, here's my short film, everyone tell me what you think. And instead of, it's like, well, like this part you might think of this, it's like very, very harsh, and like you're ripping people's hearts open, and it's like, it's just not good. But it gets away from the muse-ness and the artisticness of that inner kind of child, inner voice. And the notion of storytelling is very precious, right? So before we move to the next thing, like, tell me what happened when you saw Children of Men, and when you do good storytelling, how it can actually change a human for the better just after sitting in a dark room for like 2 hours. Like, what happened when you were watching this film? Because you and I get like very spiritual, like woo woo, and like transformed, and like my brain and my heart and my gut. Like what like what happened in that, theater or whatever, when you're watching Children of Men? Why was the storytelling so good?
It That movie specifically, and the movies that I saw around this time period, um, reminded me that things could change,
Mm,
that there's hope, that like as cynical and as broken as that main character is, played by Clive Owen, as just mangled as his heart is, having been through everything and still seeing the world just collapsed around him,
mm,
still he tries.
mm,
And it's I look for hope in movies, and I look for hope in those like hero journey stories where despite everything, you still go for it. Like, even though the world is a mess, and I need that encouragement as a sensitive and aware person on this planet. I need the encouragement in a form that's not preached to me. I don't like when hope is preached, because it's nothing. You can't preach hope. It's just, hope is just there, and you see it and you're like, got it. Okay, awesome. Going back out. I'm going back out. Send me out. Uh, but when people preach hope, that's when everyone should be worried. It's like, why do you have to, So it's in those stories that, and it was with characters that had kind of either given up, but at the same time, it's in their core to like keep going. Those revolutionary spirits that were like, things have got to change, and yet I'm like struggling internally. Like, it wasn't like, super bubbly characters that I was attracted to. It was the characters that were like, I have seen a lot. I have seen just how ugly it gets. And then you see how they see hope. And you
mm,
see how that character in the movie sees, when he's like, it's this beautiful scene when he sees the woman in the barn, and he sees that she's pregnant, and the whole movie is about the world's become infertile,
Mm,
and he sees her pregnant, and his intuition kicks in, his humanity, and those things that were lost because of what happened in the world, you can see all of them come back. He doesn't know how he's going to do it. He doesn't know where in the world there's this, but what he sees is truth and beauty, and he goes, I am going to protect that, and I'm going to help that. That is my purpose. And he's invigorated, and you see it, and I remember that, and I'm like, and it's got this beautiful music playing and everything, and I remember seeing that, and I'm like, that is what hope is like. That is what looking into the complete abyss and being like, okay, things can change, and it's extremely profound. So that is what I look for when I create stories. When I even just talking to people, it's like, where can we find the one thing that can just move us a little bit forward?
Wow. It's a lot. Hope. I like that. Now preach to me, just like it's there. And also this character that has been through some SHIT has kind of, their humanity expands the more we go through things. Wow. So tell us about what it's like working in the industry now. Like you're an idealistic person, you're a hopeful person, and from our conversations, the industry can be not all those things all the time. So what is it like working in the industry in terms of working with these artists, working with these business people? And there's a kind of a conflict that we've talked about between making money, telling good stories, and putting goodness, hope, progressive stuff out into the world, because some of those things are competing.
It's so interesting because you look at some of the most famous stories of all time, a la Star Wars, about hope. So it's when people tell me that hope doesn't equal money, I go, Star Wars, Harry Potter, money. You know, they tell me these things, I'm like, but there is a disconnect in intentions and agendas. There's a lack of awareness in what people want to do, and that's where sometimes it gets like subjective, because some people are like, I'm just here to make art. I'm not here to better the world. That is, and then there are people who they don't care. And then there's a lot of people in the industry who love storytelling. There's a lot of people who don't know people. There are people who I've worked with, they don't even like people. Now, you're working with someone that doesn't like people, telling a story about a person, you see where things might get a little bit icky, because it's so there's all this, and then there's money, and you know, and it feels like Hollywood can be very reactive when it comes to things, and how things are funded and what's funded, and you know, I don't know the inner workings of a lot of these deals and how they come to be, but I see what gets made, and I see the same narratives reinforced, and what it takes and is going to take is people having a lot of courage to take the risk. But again, the risk, hope is going to sell. You look at like a Subaru commercial, hope sells, love sells, hope sells. Okay, you got it. They get me every time. I love their commercials.
Wait, tell me about the Subaru thing, because you were saying that there's so much like masculinity, toxic masculinity, and it's also like also performance for the other romantic partner. There's like a lot you told me about what goes into like a car commercial.
Oh yeah, it goes into car commercials. Yeah, there is. It's just reinforcing. I mean, the basic what I understand about cars, especially as they're marketed to men, not necessarily marketed to women, but I guess it's even changing now. When I watch a car commercial and I'm like, okay, if I was a guy, what am I getting from this? And I think about this when I see certain ones. And I'm like, okay, so if I buy this car, I'm gonna get a partner. Someone's gonna wanna go on a date with me. I'll have a wife, I'll have a family. They've been able to distill it so much to certain feelings and certain tones and
Mm,
certain manipulations to
mm,
get you to feel like you're not enough. And they it seems like they just smack you across the face with it and smack men across the face with it.
mm.
And they're like, you know what? You're not even man enough to afford this car.
Yeah,
They'll make you feel as low as possible so that you're like, I will totally man up and buy this car. That's what I think about car commercials. I don't think that the way about Subaru or anything like that.
yeah.
But theirs is different. But it's you can see the manipulation and you see the agenda. The agenda is sell it in spite of ethics, in spite of this and that, they're willing to sell a bit of their soul. I
Yeah.
see movies do this as well. You see TV shows do this. They're willing to sell a part of it to make money.
Right, right.
It's very hard for me as an idealist to watch this.
They should listen to you because the hope sells. So why don't they? Okay. So, all right. So we're in this moment right now, and hopefully it's a longer movement. And it's been a movement for many people in America and around the world. Dante Wright just got murdered. George Floyd murdered, and then the trial happened, and Chauvin goes to jail. It's not really justice, but it's accountability. Okay. Hollywood and all the industries are, one could say, jumping on the bandwagon of like, we care, we really care. Don't look at our history, like our history's kind of troubled, but like now we care, definitely care right now. And we're gonna make movies with like Black folks, kind of not maybe so Latinx folks, some Asian folks, still white folks, but like not too many queer stories, not too many transgender stories, not too many disabled stories, but we're trying or something, or the projection that this is happening, literally and figuratively, a projection. So what are you seeing in this realm of racial, economic, gender justice in Hollywood? I won't go into specifics, but some of our conversations, you've been like, yeah, some of it's good, but then some of it's not so good. So what are you seeing?
I mean, I think you're seeing across the board in, like you said, a lot of industries. You see people that really want to change, and then you see we're going to try because we have to, because we get called out if we don't. And there's there's a major like inauthenticity to it.
Yeah.
You can smell it.
Yeah.
Everyone is like, you're sitting in a room, you like, you totally smell it. You're just like, this is garbage. And it's interesting because I don't know what needs I know what needs to happen. It's actually really simple.
Huh.
You take more risks on people that look a little bit different than what you're used to when you walk in the room. But yeah, but a lot of it feels performative to me.
Yeah.
I don't buy it. Not yet. They haven't sold me that they're changing fast enough to affect change in the world.
What about Black owned production studios and like studios that predominantly folks of color, are they able to chip away at some of the power of these large whatever media conglomerates, or is there, or it's very, very difficult for them to compete?
They are starting to be able to, with the visibility of some like key films that were popular and were like financially they did really well. Things like, oh my gosh, like the surprise that happened after Black Panther, I am just, they're like, what? We will totally add more Black people to the screen. We love Wakanda. Like, we love it. Give us everything that you can. Give us African. Give us this. You know, like, so there was a huge rush for these stories. And then what kind of happened in the process of evaluating that it wasn't exactly the same story, or like trying to hit certain formulas or however things are built. But what's wonderful about the companies that are really actually inclusive and actually diverse, now the way that they are looking for content and looking for creators, it's, the energy is so different. It's amazing, because they're like, they've been through it, and they have some OGs in there who have seen how the system works. They know just how ragged things can be on the inside, how that beast can really, really look. And it's just like in Children of Men, they're still like, you know what? We can, if we get this one here, then we can get this one here. And then if you work with this person, and then you work with, they'll do whatever they can to work within the broken system to be like, guess what? This story still needs to be told. We're still going to try to tell it. And it's that amazing energy that you're like, okay, all right, there's hope. There's hope. So, and there's a lot of places doing this now. And as the companies are elevated, and as they bring in more audiences, bring in more, then it'll just keep going. So I have hope when it comes to that. And there are also all people that are moving up, right? There's all the assistants. There's all the young writers who are getting access. There's like a whole new generation coming forward. And a lot of that generation is ready to fight for different kinds of stories, new kinds of ways of telling things with people who aren't normally seen on the screen. And it's amazing. So they're going to they'll rise through the ranks. They'll be the next executives. They'll meet the next directors, the next writers. They will have creative control, because you have to be able to have creative control to have change. That's key. If you don't have that, you can't do anything. You don't make the decisions. It's like, awesome, I love your opinion, sit down.
Yeah. All right. I know we got to wrap up soon, but right. I want to ask you something, but before that, you told me this interesting story about your dad and using this creative lens that you've been talking about of hope, but also of like, let's bring some art into this educational space that has been like the same since like the 1800s. And you were talking about this thing of like just the way the campus was laid out, that there'd be like a center structure, and then it would like emanate like music throughout from the center structure of the campus. So he was like bringing his creative artistic lens to being a principal. How was that met by the people in the educational institution?
I mean, my dad is, it's met like a lot of new things are met with. What? You want to do what? How? Why? We can't do that. You know how much money that's going to cost? You know how much time that's going to take? No one will ever buy into it. Parents, they don't want their kids in a circular school. It's met with resistance, because what his ideas are just so innovative that you're going to have to just take everything apart and put it back together. And that's met with it just it's people they just crumble, or they're like, oh my god, in theory that's amazing, which is sometimes even more, even worse, and people are like, I love that idea, and then they blank. It's just like, okay, that's the end of the conversation. But yeah, the ideas are, and there are places trying these new ways of creating the actual, helping the physical space support the curriculum and support the teachers and support, there are places that are trying to do this. But I mean, he really wants it to be like, okay, awesome, what if we turned it upside down and then went this way instead of this way, and then also it's going to be another language, and there's sparkle, it's like, it's very, very different. And so it's met with like a lot of what I think great inventions, because I'm like, oh my god, amazing, I would totally love to go to school here. It sounds like a spaceship. I just want to go to school in the spaceship.
That'd be dope. And so you're your father's daughter, and you're bringing, and your mother's daughter, and you're bringing both of these visions for how the world could be. So with all of this, all that you know about Hollywood, about the educational sphere, and even probably about therapy and your original interest in healing people and their traumas, where do you go from here? Because you're seeing how power works in Hollywood and all these things. Like, do you feel like, I know we've talked about this, like you have notions sometimes where you're like, dude, I think maybe I should just go to like childhood development angle, and we just got to go from the ground up in humanity and work on the kids, and stuff will get better. Or maybe I should stay in Hollywood and like keep pushing to make good stories that are transformative for society. Where are you right now with everything you know?
Between realms.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm just like, I just think I can fuse it somehow. And so I think it's like taking a step back and being like, all right, I need more information before I make a decision. And it's like, okay, let me go talk to people who do this. Let me go find people who are doing what it is that I want to do it, or hear people who are actually changing the world. Like, that's who I'm like interested in interviewing and getting information. And yeah, at all times I'm ready to shift the plan to be able to do what I want to do. But I'm wondering if there's a way, I think there's a way to combine what I do for a living now and merging that with the community. But it requires being a part of the community and working with community leaders and being like, hey, what if we like set up a showing, and like, we could do like a talk afterwards, and then we can just have people, they like pick their favorite character, dress up. Like it's about like this it's about like literally just taking the world and bridging them. And it's, so it's like, how do you create that so that then when it's time to enact change, there's already a dialogue happening.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, oh, I know those are my friends. And be like, okay, and these also, how do you get this? I'm just trying to make friends with these interesting people who want to actually do the work that's required to like help the world in that's very esoteric and very idealistic, but I very heartily stand by it.
Yeah, and I do as well, and I want to hear a little bit about this vision a little bit more, because we're having this conversation on a platform called Community Works Institute, and like Joe Brooks runs the nonprofit, and it brings together like administrators, classroom teachers, like upper administrators, like principals, whatever, to kind of push against the system of like, hey, like we can let go of some of the traditional systems that have not served us super well or served certain communities very well. And how do we tear down some of the silos and structures to make a more transformative world? And so I like what you're saying. And I think about this a lot because I've worked at schools where it's like, why isn't this group talking to this group? And why don't we just like tear down some of these walls and like, you go see a movie. We've done this on college campuses. You see a movie and it's really like, one of the movies was I'm Not Your Negro,
Mhm.
right? Ralph Peck. And then another one who just did Exterminate All the Brutes. Super interesting, super messed up. Another one, yeah, Black Panther was like, we rented out a theater and like, it was like all Black students and we reserved it for the Black Student Union. And it was super transformative for people because they were like, F this predominantly white institution. And it was cathartic. But like you're saying, there's no, you had the transformative experience. Okay, now go home. You know,
Yeah.
good luck. But there's no like a talk with the local political leaders. There's no connectivity with local businesses of like, Black Panther was dope. Moonlight was dope. And it's the themes of it are tenderness, Black liberation, which by proxy is like liberation of all humanity or all of America, because that's been our history, is Black civil rights has pushed stuff. You know, Jews have gotten good stuff, white women have gotten good stuff, like everybody benefits from, you know, Black liberation. And why aren't we having like a whole week or month programming that comes from this transformative experience you just saw on the screen, now can emanate out into the community? You've talked about having like a what we call like Socolo public forums and talks. What would your kind of vision look like that mixes education, media, community, discussion, dialogue, and change? Like what would it look like?
A theme park. Yeah, it's like a theme park, like something like a big space where people can integrate it. That's what it takes. It takes time. It takes, you know, you watch something and you're shocked by it because you just learned something, or you're shocked by it in like all the ranges of human emotion, and that, you know, the entire spectrum of that. And it's like, okay, well, what do I do? Okay, I want to help, but what do I do? And if you brought in, you just had like a little space, I say theme park, so it's fun and there's music and there's dancing and there's food.
And there is a theme. There is a theme.
And there's a theme, you know, and it's a protected space, and the space would be protected. Be like, right here, we're gonna figure out what to do next. This is like a space for transition. It's a space for conversation. It's a space for messy ideas, a space for not knowing, a space for knowing, bridging between like elders and the adolescents. And like it would just be like, I'm coming here. I would hope that people be like, you know what, I'm coming here because I don't know, but I want to know. And that's what it would look like. And it would have artists and have community leaders and have politicians and have all kinds of people that could just come here in a space that is like, okay, this space is for moving forward, this space is for action, and we're going to transition and build you up and break you down and confuse you and and just completely just we're going to blow everything up so that we can recreate something together. And you walk out together. That's what this theme park would look like.
We don't really have that in society. Like we don't have, I don't even want to call it school theme parks. Like we don't have intentional spaces in our society where a large amount of community members go have a transformative experience. I mean, I think church, temple, mosque used to be this, for better or for worse, I should say, for social control reasons, of you just had this like out of body experience. You prayed to this thing. You had someone tell you that this is how the world is or how the world can be. And now we're going to have lunch together. That's the closest we've kind of, in my opinion, that we've gotten to this kind of like transformative educational experience. I think now it's interesting, a little messed up, like in this pandemic experience, so many people have died and like super trauma, people are messed up, people are killing themselves. It's terrible. There's racial inequality, like wealth inequality, and it's just getting worse. But people have been like also leaning on like marijuana and alcohol is like their, I don't know, coping mechanisms. But what happens if coming out of COVID, and this probably should happen a long time ago, you have what you're talking about, like this emotional, educational theme park that, yeah, maybe you even go on some rides, and maybe you
yeah, why not? Why? I mean, there's like what the space of VR and augmented reality AR is being able to do for what if you taught stories this way? Like it just change storytelling. This is all storytelling. Everything that I mentioned, it's all storytelling. Who are you? What do you want to do? Who do you love? Who do you want to love? Do you want to learn how to love? How do you get rid of this? How do you change a society? This is all storytelling, and you can use it in a way with all different types of and formats. Music, bring in it where it's not sitting in a classroom being like, you should do this.
No.
It's not that. Here we play.
I like that. I like that a lot. Okay, we have to wrap. But stay after. We want to talk a little bit because we might have an idea here that we might have to put into existence. Because yeah, like what happens if you did go to some theme park and it was like, yeah, people actually like you left a different person, like more, I don't know, community works institute needs to create a theme park. But God, everything is so siloed, and your conversation is making me think like we go here to see a good story in a movie theater. We go here to get money from the bank. We go here to get a degree from an institution, and we go here for what some people think is God in church or temple, whatever. And it's all these like parts of who we are or could be, but there's no real integration of these different worlds. And then we wonder why people are so like emotionally constipated and like intellectually frustrated, and we have a weird society.
It's just fragmented.
Yeah.
And it's disconnected.
Yeah.
It's vibrant. It's so vibrant. All those spaces and all the creativity it took to get everything into those pieces.
Right.
That means that it can all just be, you just rebuild it. You just rebuild it. You just like, oh, okay, awesome. Well, maybe this could be here. Maybe this could be here. It just to take a lot of courage and a lot of people that are like, but I'm happy. I'm happy to like be a Miss Frizzle in this in this scenario.
Before we go, you mentioned virtual reality and AR, I guess.
Yeah.
I really don't know that much about that area. Is this something that, I don't know, is Hollywood scared of this? Because it could, I mean, what's the relationship like? Because this could be a lot, because it could over dominate Hollywood, which is a very old type of, right? Like Lumiere brothers, like just projected on the screen or projected on my phone.
Yeah.
And it's passive. It's quite passive, right? But if you're like got the goggles on, you're like, you have to climb up the mountain and you have to like jump on the deer and you have to like, you're like Zelda all of a sudden, right? Or Link. Is this a talk at all? Are people worried about this?
No, because Hollywood loves money. And it's part of Hollywood. They'll just claim it as their own kid. They love it. And it's really, really interesting. And it provides, what it provides story creators is all these opportunities, because now it's more interactive. It means you need all these extra plot lines, a ton of world building. You need the technological aspects to be able to support it so it looks good and it feels real. It is, the stuff that they are working on right now is so cool. And I'm so excited to see how it changes the movie going experience and the storytelling experience for audiences, because it's very, very different. And yet we just want to go and like have fun. You're like, oh my God, I got 2 tickets. You want to go? That's what they want to have fun. They want to be entertained. Yeah. How can you entertain me? This is the entertainment industry. Yes. So, yeah, I'm very excited to see where that space moves for story.
That's interesting. Let's end on that note, because our conversations always make me think like, oh my God, what is the future going to look like? It's like what you said earlier. It's like terrifying, but also hopeful. It's like tragic and traumatic, but also possibly healing. It's like these dualities, or probably trialities, whatever, are always at play in the universe. And it's complicated. Oh my God. Okay. All right. Stick around for a minute. Everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. This is the Spotlight series on Sundays, and Joe Brooks does it on Fridays. CommunityWorksInstitute.org. Please check them out. Check us out, CommunityWorksInstitute.org. And there's K through 16 educational opportunities, professional development opportunities, and it's fun. And now we're probably going to make a theme park as well at CommunityWorksInstitute.org. So thank you so much, Cara Lawson, for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It was a pleasure. It was a real pleasure. And we'll just keep talking. So thank you, everybody. Thank you.